Good morning. My name is Bruce Knotts, and I'm here to discuss with you climate justice. We're all in this together. We have known about climate change for over 50 years, and we've done nothing. And even today, our government is not doing enough as fires consume the West, as coastal communities are being inundated, other areas face unprecedented droughts, and never before experienced freezing temperatures around the country. Presidents Johnson and Carter warned us about climate change. Carter put solar panels on the roof of the White House, and Reagan removed them. In December 1997, 150 countries met and adopted the Kyoto Protocols to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gases. The USA refused to join. When I was the regional refugee coordinator for the U.S. government in West Africa, Republican Representative Jim Sensenbrenner, who was in 2001 chair of the House Judiciary Committee, visited and wanted to see refugee camps in the region. I was his guide. Everyone in the embassy in Abidjan was laughing at the prospect of the very progressive Bruce Knotts spending 2 weeks in refugee camps with the very conservative Jim Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin. When he visited refugee camps crowded with 40,000 refugees or more, Sensenbrenner asked in panic, "How are we going to keep these people from coming to the United States?" My response was easy. Take care of them where they are, with housing, schools, jobs, and the necessities for a dignified life. As we bounced around African back roads to get to camps, Jim Sensenbrenner regaled me with his stories about how he single-handedly kept the United States out of the Kyoto Protocols. Congressman Sensenbrenner told me repeatedly how unfair the Kyoto Protocols were to the United States. The matter of fairness continues to arise when it comes to climate change. It is a major sticking point to progress. The genius of the Paris Climate Accords was that each nation came with their own best plan to combat climate change and then signed the agreement obligating their nation to fulfill the commitments they themselves made for their own country. And still, we are failing. The United States government continues to subsidize oil companies and to starve other scientific research and development, including that for sustainable forms of energy. I hope this will change in the current administration. The USA has rejoined the Paris Climate Accords, but we have lots of work to do, including contributing to the Global Climate Fund stipulated in the Paris Climate Accords. When I attended the climate conference in Katowice, Poland in 2018, developing countries were very angry that the promised funding to help developing countries meet their climate commitments had not been forthcoming. Remember, we're in this together. Climate change is like the pandemic, only worse. No one is safe until we are all safe. So reducing carbon emissions without the help of other nations will not adequately address climate change. Like the pandemic, climate change does not respect borders or walls, and nothing will deter climate change. So we must help every nation achieve the same success we want for ourselves. Climate change has exacerbated the fires in California, the huge changes in climate, and the Arctic cold in Texas. In 2011, Texas was invited to join the national power grid, and it refused out of greed. Texas has power plants built on the cheap and not up to national standards, and then charge customers surge pricing. Good capitalist theory minimizes expenses and maximizes profit. Build power generation on the cheap and charge customers surge prices. The future can be assured by upgrading power generation to national standards, especially for sustainable ways of generating power and ending dependence on fossil fuels. Texas Governor Abbott has justifiably been criticized for falsely blaming power outages on sustainable forms of energy, saying that we need fossil fuels now more than ever. Governor Abbott cares more about cultivating his relationships with the oil industry than meeting the needs of the citizens of Texas. So, what are the options before us? We have been waiting too long to reverse climate change. The clock has run out. All we can do now is try to adapt and mitigate. One thing people will do is migrate. Walls and violence will slow the migration, for thousands and thousands will die, perhaps millions or billions will die in the process, but migration will continue. For the past more than 50 years, we, the world community, have done next to nothing, mostly on the pretext that any deal will appear unfair to one nation or another. If human beings are by nature migratory, they were by nature adverse to global cooperation also. We have managed all these thousands of years to exist, being tribes, races, nations, religions, and divided in every way imaginable. Indigenous peoples are divided in groups and tribes also, but they are united in their respect for the planet and for all the planet's systems. Wherever they live in harmony with nature and the environment. They are our best teachers and guides to living gently on the earth. Some Eastern religions also point a way to more sustainable forms of living. The United Nations has told us that it is vital for us to vastly increase the area of the Earth's surface covered by natural forests. Forests are the lungs of the earth, cleaning the air of pollutants. Unfortunately, we are burning forests and giving more and more land over to cattle raising. The United Nations says that we must change what we eat. We need to adopt a more plant-based diet if we are to survive. The Unitarian Universalists have a workable answer. It is the 2011 Statement of Conscience of Ethical Eating, Food, and Environmental Justice. It begins, quote, "Aware of our interdependence, we acknowledge that eating ethically requires us to be mindful of the miracle of life we share with all beings. With gratitude for the food we have received, we strive to choose food that minimize harm and are protective of the environment, consumers, farmers, and all those involved in food production and distribution." I encourage you to read the entire document, but I'll quote just a few more lines. "Access to an adequate supply of healthy food and clean water is a basic human need and right. Many people do not have adequate food, while others have a surplus. Minimally processed plant-based diets are healthier diets. We encourage knowledgeable choice of food based on understanding the demands of feeding a growing world population." The following year, 2012, the UUA General Assembly passed a responsive resolution. Quote, "We, the delegates of the 2012 General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association, repudiate the doctrine of discovery as a relic of colonialism, feudalism, and religious, cultural, and racial biases having no place in the modern-day treatment of indigenous peoples. And we call upon the United States to fully implement the standards of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in U.S. law, policy, without qualifications." I encourage you to read the entire UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, adopted in 2007. But here are a few provisions. Affirming that indigenous peoples are equal to all other peoples, while recognizing the right of all peoples to be different, to consider themselves different, and to be respected as such. Affirming also that all peoples contribute to the diversity and richness of civilizations and cultures which constitute the common human heritage. Affirming further that all doctrines, policies, and practices based on or advocating superiority of peoples or individuals on the basis of national origin or racial, religious, ethnic or cultural differences are racist, scientifically false, legally invalid, morally condemnable, and socially unjust. UN DRIP, as the UN Declaration is called for short, has 46 articles. There is much to learn and absorb. I hope you will take the time to do so. Think of the indigenous peoples as the teachers that we desperately need in this frightening time of climate change. Indigenous peoples hunt for food and supplies, grow crops, gather food and other materials needed for life from nature. However, unlike the rest of us, they don't have a history of totally depleting resources. They gather what's needed while preserving resources for the future. They should be our guide as well. Last year, in 2020, the Unitarian Universalist Association office at the United Nations, or for short, UU at UN, working in collaboration with the Canadian Unitarian Council, hosted our spring seminar on the topic of climate justice virtually, with a focus on Indigenous peoples. This year, in 2021, we hosted the seminar on the topic of climate justice with a focus on food equity. Next year, in 2022, we are thinking of hosting a seminar on climate-forced migration. This year's virtual seminar gave us the ability to reach participants and invite speakers from around the world without the cost of traveling to New York City. This year, we had 215 participants, 45 of whom Zoomed in from Canada. We were able last year and this year to obtain live speakers from around the world, including amazing youth speakers such as those we had last year from the Philippines, Scotland, Canada, and elsewhere. We will assess the health situation next year. We are thinking of returning to an in-person seminar with a virtual option. We'll let you know what we decide as time goes on. We hope that you will volunteer for the upcoming Spring Seminar Planning Committee, and we'll be putting that together in August or September this year. We continue to engage the United Nations in virtual meetings with the permanent representatives of all of the members of the UN Security Council, and with high-level UN diplomats, diplomats from other member states, and with NGOs from both faith-based and secular organizations. We've been in touch with the missions of Chad and Costa Rica to offer our support in their initiative to establish a permanent forum on peoples of African descent. We hope that if this forum is established at the United Nations, that it will be a powerful venue from which to advocate for the end of global white supremacy, state-sponsored violence and police brutality against peaceful demonstrators and civilians, especially civilians of color. We hope to begin a robust discussion on reparations for slavery and the ravages of colonialism, which continue to marginalize much of the world. To be clear, reparations means to repair unlawful damage to people and societies. The objective is to restore what was damaged, stolen, or destroyed. If you hit my car, I want my car fixed or replaced. It's not complicated. It's what's fair and in the best interests of us all. None of us are safe until all of us are safe. While we work virtually, our work is not free. We continue to need your support to be able to promote our values at the United Nations and to learn and transmit back to you the experience and wisdom of the entire world that meets and works at the United Nations to ensure that we have a sustainable, peaceful, and just world for ourselves and those who come after us. Please support this important and vital work. Thank you.